ye up then the measure of your father? Ye serpents, ye offspring of vipers, how can ye escape the damnation of hell? Wherefore, behold, I send to you prophets and wise men and scribes, and some of them ye shall kill and crucify, and some of them ye shall scourge in your synagogues and persecute them from city to city, that upon you may come all the righteous blood shed upon the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, son of Berechiah.
Hello, good morning. Need a moment or two there more. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We're continuing today in the book of Genesis. And, let me fix my headphones. There we go. Oh, that's even better, right? All right. So we're in chapter 6. Let's read from the beginning. Oh, I didn't drop chapter 7 in. I will do so now. There we go. All right. And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair. And they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children unto them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God. And Noah begat 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. And God said unto Noah, The end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. And behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make thee an ark of gopher wood. Rooms shalt thou make in the ark, and shalt pitch it within and without with pitch. And this is the fashion which thou shalt make it of. The length of the ark, excuse me, the length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, the breadth of it 50 cubits, and the height of it 30 cubits. A window shalt thou make to the ark, and in a cubit shalt thou finish it above. And the door of the ark shalt thou set in the side thereof, with lower, second, and third stories shalt thou make it. And behold, I, even I, do bring a flood of waters upon the earth, to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life from under heaven. And everything that is in the earth shall die. But with thee will I establish my covenant. One second here. Sorry, I should have kept it muted for the cough. Ready? With thee shall I establish my covenant. And thou shalt come into the ark, thou and thy sons and thy wife, and thy sons' wives with thee. And of every living thing of all flesh, 2 of every sort shalt thou bring into the ark, to keep them alive with thee. They shall be male and female. Of fowls after their kind, and of cattle after their kind, of every creeping thing upon the earth after his kind, 2 of every sort shall come unto thee, to keep them alive. And take thou unto thee of all food that is eaten, and thou shalt gather it to thee, and it shall be for food for thee and for them. Thus did Noah. According to all that God commanded him, so did he. Okay, originally we were supposed to start this at verse 5, but I wanted to say a little bit more about the previous section. One, both to, maybe to demonstrate, to talk about another aspect of the sons of God that I haven't talked about. One, all the instances of that phrase, sons of God, we have in Genesis 6, and then we have several occurrences in Job, and then that's it. And then we have the New Testament. In the New Testament, there's an entirely different idea of what a son of God is. Because, well, not really. I mean, but what it is the idea is that, as many as received him, to them gave he power to become the sons of God. When they accuse him of claiming to be the Son of God, which he does not deny, because that is the truth, but when they accuse him of this, they also say that in so doing, he made himself equal with God. Now, in Job, the sons of God are clearly meant to refer to angels. It says there was a certain day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord. That's in Job 1. In Job 38, he says, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. But really, we don't get that phrase much. Now, we do get the phrase son of God. But that is a very peculiar phrase. For example, in Daniel, where it talks about the fourth figure inside the fiery furnace being likened to the Son of God, right? But that's about it in the Old Testament. And then we have Matthew and all the verse, everything referring to Christ. And that's why I do like, but you can make a strong textual case that these are angels here. I do like to prefer some sort of explanation that does not require that. Because like I said, while you can make a strong textual case for it, and even so also with the idea of Noah being perfect in his generations. And we can look at that in multiple ways, but one way could be, that he was not now related with these angels. But the problem I have with that is it's sort of like, what's going on? You mean like, why is man getting blamed for God just having an open door with the angels coming down and coming? And if the angels are taking the daughters of men, this is something that is really not man's doing. It's just the angel world sort of predating on the human world. It leads to a lot of thoughts like ancient aliens and stuff like that, right? Because where they come from, they came from heaven. And this idea of, okay, you have these otherworldly beings coming down and having children. But I really do prefer to think of it otherwise. I don't think it's the godly line of Seth marrying into the ungodly line of Cain, because there is no, godly line is only observed after the fact. Like when Isaac begat Jacob and Esau, though the Lord knew from the womb, it wasn't clear that Isaac knew, because he wanted to put the blessing on Esau. He thought that was, that his son Esau would be the heir. And not that this was, I don't want to make too big a deal about what Isaac thought, but the point is, well, Esau wasn't the heir. Ishmael wasn't the heir. There is no holy line that is only based on the carnal. Now, there is an aspect of the carnal line that is important, because even in the New Testament it says that the believing spouse but the unbelieving spouse is sanctified by the believing. Else your children would be defiled. And so that implies that your children can be holy, which implies a sort of dedication to the Lord, which implies there's some sort of covenantal relationship. In fact, I know some denominations actually very much emphasize that. I think it was like the Evangelical Covenant. I think they have a big emphasis on that, or something. I that's the impression they gave me. I associated with them for 2 days. It wasn't much of a experience, but they had a emphasis on the family being this sort of covenantal thing. And I won't deny that I kind of believe in that I believe my children are heirs of the promise as long as they take it up. They have to take it up, and they have to be faithful to it like Esau. I mean, like Jacob. They can't be like Esau. Being born Christian didn't guarantee anything for me. But like Paul talks about the Jews, they had certain advantages. And I did too. I grew up with a children's Bible next to my bed. And as atheists have pointed out, if you were born in India, you wouldn't be the same. No kidding. No kidding. That's the point of what advantage had the Jew. Then they tell us this like it's like they're making a revelation. They're like, yeah, I know that matters. They act as if it's like, what, it has to be evenly distributed. You've never read the New Testament? The uneven distribution of things is understandable. It's not. It was baked into the cake. It was known from the beginning. That is not to say, God's fairness, is seen in sort of this ark story, in that, one thing comes upon all. All right. So before we talk about that, the sons of God, in the New Testament, we become sons of God through faith in Christ, right? That's where we receive the power to actually become. We become in promise, by declaration of God, we are already the sons of God. But, it doesn't exactly appear like we're, not exactly exalted sons of God. And when we use that term, we think of that in terms of the glorification. Because the truth is, we will be glorified with him. Because that is the reward of our faith. We will be glorified with him. There is glory to be received. And that's why I look at these sons of God, I'm a little skeptical of them. One, all right, people already say they're evil angels. Okay, so we're already we know that these sons of God, they were saying this is the ungodly line of Cain. Well, that doesn't make sense. And why it would be the sons of Adam. And so, I don't know. I guess I think about when it does make a little sense, because, again, when Eve had Cain, she said, "I've gotten a man from the Lord." And so it's sort of like the sons of God being the first men, I suppose, the original patriarchs, and they were very long lived. A lot of Cain's descendants. And Adam had sons and daughters. A lot of them aren't mentioned. We mention the ones that are sort of the kingdom inheritors, because they are the heirs. The heirs are not apparent till they've become the heirs. Like Noah was not necessarily the firstborn son of Jared. Was it Jared or Lamech? Sorry. Someone keeps correcting me. That was his great-grandfather's son, right? Something like that. Anyways, but he likely, we always, we know Seth wasn't the firstborn son of Adam. We assume him to be the thirdborn son. But how do we know that they weren't all just somewhere in the mix? We don't precisely. We presume that. Like a lot of things about the flood that we presume, because granted, the text is very suggestive on a lot of accounts. That's what leads people to believe in a week-long creation that's a literal week, because the text gives one that impression. It is easy to fall into that sort of impression. But and you would say, well, okay, so does that mean that's a preferred interpretation because it's easy to get to? It's a good question. And I would say generally, yeah, we should prefer the easy interpretation. But it's not always the case. Parables and a lot of the stories in the Bible are important on face value, but there's often something much more important not on face value. I don't want to say don't take stories at face value, because when I think of the parables of Jesus, but this is not precisely a parable. I wouldn't call it that anyway. I do think something happened, and the record of it here is somewhat, I know, like I said, in the apocryphal books, they affirm that angels did come down. So that's what that interpretation's been around for a long time. Now, it could be that was an interpretation made based on the idea that there was this tradition of nebulous sons of God, and then it became traditional to interpret that as angels. And then that became the basis for some of those apocryphal writings. So it's hard to tease out where the original, what the original intent is. But I just wanted, the main thing was to bring in the New Testament, and also the fact that it does seem that whatever they were doing is connected to the wickedness of man. That it was great in the earth. Men, they were taking wives. We were supposed to reproduce and all that. The Lamech, the grandson of Cain, or great grandson, whatever. He took 2 wives, right? And then they were taking wives of all which they chose. And I do think this is, from the beginning, as it says. What did it say? What did Jesus say? From the beginning, God created them male and female. And for this cause, a man shall leave his father and mother and shall cleave unto his wife. That relationship is at the very beginning. This is bone of my bone. In the words of Adam, codified. Because it's a manifest truth. Like I said, a lot of things, a lot of things it's not obvious why they're wrong. But some things it is quite obvious why it's wrong. We become hardened to it. People become desensitized to it. But wrong is wrong. And first of all, a man should have one wife. It's not, Jacob had more than one wife. Okay, but he didn't intend that. And that was not by choice. It wasn't like something you could say partially, but in a sense, because he was in love with one girl and he was forced to marry another, he wasn't going to abandon the first girl when he'd been tricked, quite frankly. So, but Jesus said, from the beginning, divorce was not right. It's always wrong. It's always the result of something going bad. It's like, it doesn't mean if you're divorced, you're a second-class citizen. You can never, be remarried. You can never find righteousness. All that's nonsense. There's forgiveness, of course. But the point is, everyone knows divorce is a disaster. It's like death. Something has happened to break up something that was created, that was its own thing, that's now been, absolutely demolished. And and I think that taking this implies sort of the heaping of wives by great men. In the beginning of things like harems. You know what I mean? Of people, I still think of people elevating themselves above others. They were not merely the sons of Adam. We are not merely the sons of Adam. We are the sons of God himself, Sorry about this. Local area code, anyways. I guess I like that interpretation. That's an interpretation a lot of Main Street people, they do the line of Cain. Like I said, those who are going the way of Cain, but it's not that they're intermarrying with good people. It's just, they're just I think it's mostly they are taking them wise of all which they chose. Of all. You know? There's something about that phrasing. It wasn't like, you know what I mean? There's something sort of evil here. Right? I think that's the implication. And the Lord, and it has something to do with man. And the fact that this is where he limits man's years, I think it was the longevity of men combined with, this, they were building themselves probably empires evil of evil and wickedness and such. There were giants in the earth. All right, we read about that. We talked about the giants. It could be they are regarded as giant in the book of Numbers. The sons of Anak, we were as grasshoppers in their sight. But the thing is that was the report of the cowardly. The Caleb and Joshua weren't too impressed with the giants. And and again, because there wasn't, there were a few giants around, but it wasn't like there was like just like a race of giants waiting to eat them up. Again, it's very easy to make someone pretty big look even huger, to give an impression. When they went in to take the land, there were some sons of Anak there, but it was not as like this. There was nothing that the Lord could not have carried them through to defeat them. But even so, these giants, again, it's not so much. It's that they are mighty men, which are. I wonder, mighty men were gibor in Hebrew. That's usually the word. I just want to see. Oh, I got the wrong version of the Bible. The Giborim, the mighty ones, mighty men. There's several words for men. There's Adam, referring to man as human, and there's Ish, which refers to man in a sort of a higher sense, but also to a male, because there's Isha, which is a female, and then there's Gibor, which is like a man. Let's see, where are they? We want 6. Mighty men. And it is Gibor, strong or mighty. They were Gibor. Strong or mighty. In that sense, again, do they all have to be physical giants? I would say not, not necessarily. Some giants are physical. Some are, giants in other ways. Men of renown, men of great name. This is the old world, though. God spared not the old world, but saved Noah, the 8th person. And so the imagination of the thoughts of men's hearts was only evil continually. This is the lesson of the flood. When man's wickedness comes to the great level, and the imagination and the thoughts of our hearts is only evil continually. Because we don't moderate that. Moderate our thoughts. It says, bringing captive every thought into the obedience of Christ. That's a tall order. To actually not just rein in your outward behavior, the things that people can see and judge, but the inward things that no one sees. But if you don't mind your thoughts, because that's where all the evil begins. It begins in your heart. It begins with your thoughts. That if we can take control of our thoughts, we can then take control of our tongue, which is most difficult member to master. But it starts in the heart and in the brain. Whatever you want to think. The heart is it's a metaphor or whatever. It means that part of you that is the truest yourself. Down at the core of your being, so to speak. Well, the thoughts of men at the core were evil. I know what this is. I know what my mind was like when I was not thinking on the Lord. I know what it is sometimes when I'm not thinking about it now. We get men, but when men turn their back on God and they don't have, Not just turn their back on God, because it's like, again, they don't have any law to turn their back on. The only law they know is that knowledge of good and evil they've been given. But they turn it and corrupt it. They use it against each other. They use it to make war on each other, to enslave each other, to heap wives to themselves, to enslave other men. All the things that men have done since the flood, you can count on it. They were doing it, and in greater measure before. And it was even worse so because men were so much longer lived. And so he says, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast and creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for repent of me, I have made him. Again, there are certain parts of this narrative that make it hard for me to do what I want to do, which is say that the flood was local. I do think that the events, the literal events that the Noah's flood refers to, were global in scale for sure. It's just the idea of the earth as a big ball of water, where all the water had covered everything, so that it was just that volumetrically that water. Like imagine just a calm ocean, and the earth was nothing but a calm ocean. Like, there's a lot of problems with that. And that's not how I interpret what I read from Genesis. Because I just think that while it talks about the water going over the tops of the mountains, which that would be, I think, a local phenomenon, I suppose. Because the water would top mountains in certain places in the deluges that did occur. So he says, they repented of the Lord, he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. It's an interesting thing for it to say about God, right? Because it certainly for me, it feels uncomfortable somewhat, because not really uncomfortable, but it's something I have to think about and measure, because, I think of God as intentional. The New Testament guides me in that direction, to trust in the Lord. God is not reacting to the wild, predations of evil and sort of patching up his plan as he goes along. But what I would say, the things God says are often said for our benefit. He doesn't say it because to reveal his ignorance, like, Adam, where are you? God, the Lord said in order to show us that he didn't know where Adam was. You know what I mean? You can read the Bible like that and you're totally wrong. Like, that's not what's intended by that. And you're missing it. So I think that can also be said here, like where sometimes, like when I was talking earlier about how we take it, the meaning that is most easily fallen into, is that the meaning we should follow? Because it's very easy to interpret Adam, where are you? And say, well, God didn't know where Adam was. And God didn't know what happened to Abel. And it's very easy to say that God had a change of heart. Like he suddenly felt different about everything. Like, I made this world and, it hurts. It hurts. Now, I'm not saying that it doesn't hurt. What I'm saying is God says this for our benefit, expressing for us how he would feel if he was a man, because he's not. God is not a man. But what we did is the sort of thing that would grieve him if he was. And when he was, as Jesus, I suppose the grief would be real. And in a sense, I suppose that's how God would experience grief, would be through the person of the Son. It makes more sense to me, especially if you think of the Father's will as being immutable. You know what I mean? As far as that, then I can understand, when Jesus weeps. And so there's a lot of ways I can deal with it. You know what I mean? But like I said, it's not necessarily here for us to read it the wrong way, which is to say that, God doesn't know what he's doing. He's just kind of reacting to things. That's not what this means. Any more than Adam, where are you means he didn't know where Adam was, and any more than Where's your brother Abel? Means he didn't know what happened to Abel. God knew. The blood was already crying out to him. And when he planted the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, he knew this was coming. Right? The grief. And I would say that just, here's the thing. It's one thing to do things and then to know what's going to be. Right? Just like Christ is exalted, set down at the right hand of God, hey, and we know he's going to reign. But it's another thing for him to actually come and reign. Same thing. It's another thing for actually God to make man, him to eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and then to go ahead and fall, and then to just live out everything that the Lord expects. I guess when I think about it that way, I can understand why he was grieved. Though this was his intent, though he expected this of us, of mankind, he expected nothing better. And so part of what is this done for an example? To we, upon whom, he destroyed the whole world and saved just 8 people. And that's the point he wants to get across. It doesn't matter if the flood wasn't worldwide and like locally he saved Noah and locally over here was spared something else. And I don't know. And again, some people would find that very offensive. I don't, because again, my faith isn't based on a very rigid interpretation of very ancient events and texts that are not, like I said, a lot of this is a very dense telling of events that took place over a long period of time. And a lot of history went on in the antediluvian period that we have no knowledge of. There was an old world. There were artificers. There were instructors of artificers. There were preachers of righteousness. But the world that was perished. This, I believe there were advanced civilizations. According to archaeology, they know they were advanced. They were doing advanced stuff 12,000 years ago because they dig it up. And a lot of the stuff we attribute, I think, to, whatever. I don't want to get into that. That's all speculation. But we know this. There was an old world. And it was destroyed. And the stories came down. There was because all over the world there's stories of floods and destruction. And so it happened. It's a very old memory. A lot of people don't want to think, a lot of people want to live in denial because, as Peter said, this they are willingly ignorant of. The earth standing out of the water and in the water, how the world being overflowed with water perished. When we fill the world with violence, when the imaginations of our heart are only evil, which is the trend, as men turn their hearts from God, they turn their hearts towards evil. Because that's what, when you turn your heart to good, it is because you see the image, our conscience. Like I said, it's like a fragment or some portion or a shadow of the image of God in us. Part of the way we've been made in his image and part of the fact that we have the knowledge of good and evil in us, like he does. We are like him in that, except in so doing, it made us sinners and also dead. Before we had that, we could have maybe lived forever in a state of, of not having that knowledge of good and evil, I guess. It's interesting. But that was not the intent, obviously. If God wanted that, he wouldn't have put the serpent in. If God wanted that, he wouldn't have put the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the garden at all. He would have just put man in the middle of a garden with the tree of life. Done. Mission accomplished. No, there was more to it than that. Much more. But he's going to hit the reset here. He's going to destroy the entire world. Both man and beast, the creeping thing, fowls of the air. For repenteth me that I have made them. I'll say, repenteth, what does that mean in Hebrew? What's that word? It's what kind of repentance? There's different kinds of words they use. Repenteth. Nacham. And To be sorry, to console oneself. What's it coming from? What's the idea? It's interesting. It means to be moved to pity, to have compassion, but also to be sorry, to rue, to suffer grief. So it's more about the feeling of properly to sigh, to breathe strongly, by implication to be sorry. In a favorable sense, to pity, or in an unfavorable sense, to avenge. So, it has a lot of interesting. It's interesting. A word that can be both pity and revenge. Or reflexively to rue. And that's what we're using here, because it's pointed at himself, I guess. That's what the translators would have us. I guess if you took the vengeance thing, it would be pointed at them in a sense, right? Let's go back. He repented the Lord. Yeah, because it is reflexive there. I don't see how you can put it any other way. He was repented that he had made man on the earth. He rued that. Because why? Man does evil. Man does evil. So, now, later on, through Christ, the Lord makes a way of redeeming man. But here, he's going, to redeem men. But here he has Noah, who finds grace in the eyes of the Lord. Notice, he found grace. That's very important. Because, like I say, even the fathers, people always talk about the Old Testament. Oh, it's based on works. No, it isn't. It is impossible to please God by works anytime. Even in the Old Testament, you weren't going to please him by works. Not without grace. Because God has to accept your works. Just like with Cain and Abel. Cain did works, but they weren't accepted. Abel did works, they were. You can say, well, what was it about this? It doesn't. For practical purposes, it doesn't matter, because we're just talking about God. The aspect on God accepting it. We do things like, because I go back to like David and Saul. Saul's offenses, in some ways you could look at him and feel like, wow, he just did things that were true disobedient. But it was like, oh, he didn't kill everybody. Oh, he didn't do, he did things that was like, whereas David was also disobedient. God said, thou shalt not commit adultery. It's not like David didn't know it was wrong. It wasn't a direct command, but, and then he had someone essentially murdered by the sword of Midian, I think it was. I forgot, so no, it wasn't Midian, but sort of whatever. And so David could be looked at and say, well, that seems worse. Well, it's not about the crime. It's not about the thing you did. It's about finding grace in God's eyes. There's entirely intangible thing. Well, they're not entirely intangible. The Lord has shown us, we have to walk humbly with God. Do justly, love mercy. Saul's disobediences may have seemed smaller, but his service was more eye service than David. His service was less love than David. He served God, but he served himself. And oftentimes, people, they take up the service of God, but they're really serving themselves. And so my point is just that the differential between them is not about how good the works of David were versus the works of Saul. David had his ups and downs. But what was it? I will not take my mercy away from him. I will not... well, they were called the sure mercies of David because he would not take his covenant from David. What was it? I would not take away my compassion from him. I forgot what the exact wording would be, but it was essentially he would not... the compassion and the love which God felt for David would not be repented of. Noah found grace. And by saving, God saved the human race by saving Noah, by preserving him. Again, and my point in that is not to say that literally, it's not a statement about the literal, well, was there anyone else who survived the cataclysms that Noah survived? Like in another part of the world or something like that? I'm not commenting on that so much as what I'm saying is God is painting us a picture of how it works. We need to find grace in the eyes of God to be saved. Now, he's already shown us what this looks like. Now what it looks like for us is when we hear the gospel. Not just when we hear it, but when we hear it and it enters into our hearts and we believe it. And that's the beginning of our faith. That's where we enter in and we begin to take on the nature of Christ. Through faith in that, in his life, his death, and his resurrection. So Noah was a just man, again, and perfect in his generations. Perfect in his generations implies pedigree, according to some. Now, because generations means, or can mean, let's see, let me look at this. So, generations, see, the problem is, generations can mean multiple things. It can mean a period of time, a generation, or a dwelling. It's only used as dwelling once. So, it means like an age, period, age, generation, mostly poetic here it says. Wait. Yeah, I don't, honestly, I remember them saying it meant pedigree, but I don't really see any, properly it means a revolution of time, an age or generation. It comes from the word that means to heap or pile up, to dwell, like heap up the years. A generation, a pile of years, they all go together, because they're part of that generation. It's a heap. It's it's like we categorize time periods by generations. So, that's fascinating to me because I don't know how that ever got past me. That Arnold Murray used to tell me that meant perfect. That meant pedigree. Now, perfect means complete or sound. Tamim. I see nothing intact, whole, entire. I guess I'm trying to figure out where they would get that from. Well, I see. There we go. I find no cause for talking about that. Noah wasn't, because some people would say and have said that Noah's family was the only one that was not interbreeding with angels. Again, like I said, that whole storyline, I'm like, what is God doing? He's like got the door to heaven open. The angels are just coming down and making babies. And it's causing him to have to flood the earth because of that. You know what I mean? And man's just along for the ride in that picture, But I do think, no, we're in the driver's seat as far as we feel like we are. We're the ones who are driving our own destruction. We're going about and doing things as one would expect. Honestly. But, God made the world where we had the choice. I know he knows where we're going with it. And it even intends that we go that way. But still, it's important for him to present us with a choice. Because we do, while we are not compelled to do these things by God. If we are compelled, it is our own lust. If we are compelled, it is our own nature compelling us. If I'm compelled to do things that are displeasing to God, it is me that pushes it, or Satan or sin dwelling in me. Again, because I don't consent to this anymore, because I have put my faith in Jesus, it is not me that does it, but sin that dwells in me. But before, It might as well have been me because I was so indistinguishable from my sin natures. I don't know. You couldn't put a difference between them. He walked, so he was perfect in his generations. He was not like the men of his time. He walked with God. He was just. Again, perfect in his time. After the flood, he's drunk. That is not, again, he found grace. Maybe he drank a bit, okay. That's it. That's his only vice. May not be the worst thing in the world, of course, after the flood, maybe it was just it'd been so long. Again, it didn't mean he was a drinker all the time, but he got drunk, Maybe suddenly quit in his youth, and then after the flood, everyone's dead, and he's sitting around in a cave somewhere, and, maybe it just kind of was a bit much, He wasn't getting drunk while he was building the ark, thank God, right? No, the ark is looks a little off there, buddy. Maybe you should lay down a bit before you continue working on it, right? No, I don't think so. But anyways, and I like that they have the story of Noah getting drunk because it helps us understand the context in which it says he was just and perfect and all that. Well, he was just. Like I said, it doesn't mean he was sinless. Perfect also doesn't mean sinless. It just means among his generation. Again, that's like I talked about hyperbole before. Right? It's something that's kind of not meant to be taken literally because it's almost an exaggeration. Like if I say, "Oh, you got to come to the party. Everybody's coming." Is absolutely everybody coming? No, well, no, most everybody, obviously. But people say that all the time, and they don't mean you to take it literally. And a lot of times language just is that way. It's not meant to be taken to that full extent. Like the earth was filled with violence. Every thought was evil, only continually. Are we supposed to believe that that's literally true? Just about, though, I would figure, right? I mean, just about literally true. It's not meant to be, again, like I said, it's like if you think I'm saying something bad, I'm not. It's just it's no different than today. Some of the thoughts are just mundane. It's like, I got to go to the bathroom, like is that only evil? They never thought about using the bathroom? No, but the point is that there was no turning to the Lord for good. Men had been calling on the name of the Lord. But to what purpose? I don't know. It's like, a lot of times, I mean, if you think about it, the things we associate with ancient man are things like, human sacrifice and things like that. And looking, if they knew, again, the first fathers knowing Adam and such would have had more faith in God as far as in the knowledge that God existed. Maybe not trust in God or faith with God, but as far as they would know that God was there. And perhaps thought, again, like Lamech, like, well, if Cain will be avenged sevenfold, me 7 times sevenfold, 70 times 7, or whatever, and other people also. And then they say, like, look if Abel's sacrifice was acceptable to God, I'll make it even more acceptable sacrifice. I have all my children here to offer up, whatever. They explore, they don't know God. They corrupt that image. They have some inkling of who God is, but that becomes corrupted by their minds. Except for Noah. And again, is Noah just smarter than everybody? No, there was, like I said, there is a line. There's a godly line. But it's always of those who give heed. Noah was just and perfect, not because of his DNA. He probably had a lot of brothers that were miserable and rotten. Because you know how I know that? Because I didn't check back, but let's see. Let's see. And Lamech lived after he begat Noah 595 years, and he begat sons and daughters. And none of them got on the ark. They all move over the mountains to where the water wasn't coming? I doubt it. I don't even, again, like I said, because I don't think this is a worldwide catastrophe. There's nowhere you run to. So I don't necessarily think that, like I said, it was just a ball of water, but there was floods all over the place, you bet. And men perishing, and animals perishing. There was they have places where they found flash frozen mammoths. This isn't something I just heard about from Arnold Murray. I've heard people talk about it recently. Animals that are frozen, and the food in their mouth. This, like I said, I've heard this repeated by multiple sources of this account in Russia, where they discovered the mammoth flash frozen. They say flash because the food in its mouth had not even begun to rot. It was still fresh. It was chewing the food up, and the whole thing got froze at once. The whole thing. So there was stuff happening. Something going on. It was like the day after tomorrow. Like that movie where everything freezes suddenly. I don't know if everything freezes suddenly or what or how, again. But like I said, Noah is the seed of the woman here, the chosen carrier of hope and of the promise of God. Though one wonders, when you get down to Abraham, if Abraham isn't sort of learning it all new. I don't know. I don't know because, like I said, because the accounts from the very ancient, from the antediluvian period, are so sketchy. If you think about it, there's not a lot said. And it was a long time before the flood. And after. And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. Through the knowledge of good and evil, we corrupt our ways. We see advantage we could take over someone. We see ways we could hurt people, or whatever. Or again, vulnerability. It's not necessarily you hurt someone. Like I take advantage of someone's vulnerability, like if they're weak and I physically dominate them, right? But also, when someone is ignorant and they don't have knowledge and I lie to them, that's also a form of, what would I call it? Well, I'm damaging them in some way, aren't I? Because they don't know the truth and I'm giving them a lie. That's damaging. You're robbing someone in a certain sense. And so that is all part of that. And I use that because it's one of the most common things is that virtually everyone, I think, has lied at some point. Because we all come up against it. Because we all eventually do something we shouldn't. And we lie to cover it up. Except perhaps except perhaps George Washington. I cannot tell a lie. I don't know. That's apocryphal. That's not supposedly true. But whatever. I always like to make room imagining that there's someone who has no problem with lies. Just I don't want to insult that person if they're watching. Oh, because someone could be, because again, someone could be just utterly, you could be totally truthful, but not because you're virtuous. You could just lack tact. You know what I mean? And so some people can't help but tell the truth. That's not necessarily, that's good. And that's, again, now you're not vulnerable to that sin, if that's the case. But it doesn't relieve us of other things. Just because we have, we may find ourselves not particularly tempted by something. Not all temptations are equally felt by all people. I mean, there are things that come on us that are common to man, but it's not common to every single man necessarily. It's like not all men have the same struggle with lust. Not all men struggle with the same amounts of struggle of lust, It's just not the same for everybody. Not everybody is as susceptible to things like drugs and alcohol. Not everyone is prone to lying, as I've been saying. The earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. So again, that's the outcome of all that marrying is a lot of violence. So, like I said, to me it looks like a lot of kingdom building That's why I think a lot of kingdom building, a lot of exalting of themselves, of men seeking to elevate themselves above other men, to be as the sons of God, as they are, in a sense, as we all are his children, in a particular sense. But the problem is we're carnal, sold under sin. God does not acknowledge us as his children. Certainly not anymore. But through the gospel, he does, of course, obviously. Through the gospel, we have the adoption, and we are his children again. But these are, again, like the angels, if the fallen, because fallen angels, should we still call them sons of God? Nephilim, fallen ones, okay. But it seems like the Nephilim are not necessarily the same as the sons of God. That was another thing I didn't mention, but it's not clear. You know, there were giants in the earth. There were Nephilim, fallen ones, fell ones. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean fallen like gravitationally. It means fell like in the sense of these are destructive, dangerous men, the giants, the fell ones. You know, and that's what's going on. It's bringing about that men are evil. They want to be like the fell ones, you know. But it says, and also after that, presumably after the flood, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men and they bare them children. After that, after the flood, after that, that's a little confusing. Again, it still is. So we have the generations of Noah, just and perfect. He walked with God. He had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. We talked about the corruption, the end of all flesh. The earth is filled with violence. I will destroy them with the earth. And so then he goes on to tell him to make the ark. And he goes, pitch it within and without with pitch, right? You're going to make it this length, 300 cubits. The cubit is the length between the elbow and the tip of the finger. There's several measures. There's an interesting thing with the golden mean, and like it's like the fingers, the palm, the palm like this from here to here, and then the cubit, and then there's the arm. There's like this progression of measuring that they used to use, and they're a ratio one of the other actually, which is interesting, which follows the golden mean, or the golden ratio as they call it. I don't get into geometry much on that. So he uses the cubit, 300 cubits, 50 cubits, 30 cubits. So that's like basically a rectangular prism, 30 high, 50 wide, and 300 in length. So it's kind of like, you know, like a flat box, like a shoebox, basically, right? Shoebox shape. They often round it out because it's not necessarily said make it square, but that's the general dimensions of it, you know. A window, a cubit shalt thou finish it above. Small, it's a small window. And then a door on the side. Even I do bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life from under heaven. And anything that is in the earth shall die. Notice it's from under heaven. That's pretty all-encompassing. That's why I always say that it's textually speaking, it's very easy to get into a global flood mindset. And and like I said, I do believe that the flood was not just some local flood, though. You know what I mean? I believe there was worldwide flooding, just not precisely like this gently rising tide, so to speak, that just sort of like the whole world is just now water and Noah's gently sailing on the water. I guess I just don't see that picture. There's issues, I guess, because geologically, I've never found anyone who could show where that was. Because while there's evidence of flooding all over the world, there's also other kinds of, you know, landscapes which are not the result of flooding, which have been around a while. You know, because when you have flood and runoff, it tends to do things. You know, it tends to have an effect. You'll see that like in the Scablands in Washington. I think it's Washington, Oregon. They call it the something or other Scablands, where there was a huge amount of flooding, and the landscape shows it. And that's the thing, is we need to see places where there was actual flooding, which there are flooded places all over the world. But again, not every single thing in the world has been underwater. Though I guess in some ways, yes, they have been. Here's the problem about why I even, and maybe we'll save this for next time because we're at the last hour. But we're going to have to talk about the flood itself now. I mean, we've talked about Noah, his entry to the ark. He is accepted before God. He is a preacher of righteousness. He has grace. And God establishes his covenant, notice, with him. Because that is the part of it. It's the promise. He is inheriting it. Lamech has did I get that right? Yeah, Lamech had other kids. He had other kids. Noah isn't bringing his brothers and sisters on the ark. Not coming. But the wife and the sons and their wives, and of every living thing, two of every sort. And he goes through the fowls, right? Every sort of the kind. And then we'll get into the flood. We're going to start with chapter 7, because I think we've gotten here. We read it, he will take, he gathered food, right? And the animals would come to him, as it says, two of every sort. Now, just briefly, it's one of the problems that I look at the literalist interpretation is that, one, and we'll talk about this a little more, is that there's a lot of stuff that's been alive. I mean, even if you pare it down to just, okay, we're just going to take the types of creatures, right? We're just going to take one kind of bear, one kind of big cat, I guess, maybe one kind of little cat. I don't know. I don't know how they divide this up. One kind of, dinosaur that's with this kind of dinosaur, one kind of that kind of dinosaur, because they have the dinosaurs on the ark. Then when you get off the ark, a lot of those creatures don't make it. They just don't make it. They immediately go extinct. It's kind of pointless to bring them in the first place. Should have brought some of the other creatures, probably. But the other creatures, they do great. In fact, they instantly, almost, in geological terms, instantly, they instantly differentiate and evolve into, like, the bear goes from just being a kind of a bearish creature that's just like bear-shaped to being a polar bear, a brown bear, a black bear, a panda bear, and then also, because they include panda bears and ringtail bear, and I think it's ringtail bear. And there's a couple other bears, too. There's like 9. 9 bears evolved in just a few centuries. But all the dinosaurs went extinct. All the different cats. Not only did they evolve in just a few centuries, they again, geologically, instantly repopulated everywhere. So again, there's issues with that. Again, not to whatever. I just want to understand. I believe in the Lord Jesus. I believe, he referred to Noah as in the days of Noah. Like I said before, it doesn't mean everything has to be just so. I do believe in the man. I like the names of the patriarchs, I think, and all that stuff is antediluvian information handed down. I believe that absolutely. I do believe that this stuff does come down. It is part of that tradition. And anyways, we'll continue at chapter 7:1 tomorrow, okay? And we're still going to be on the subject of the flood, so there's plenty more to talk about it. So thanks for joining me. We'll be back in tomorrow.
Fill ye up then the measure of your father. Ye serpents, ye offspring of vipers, how can ye escape the damnation of hell? Wherefore, behold, I send to you prophets and wise men and scribes, and some of them ye shall kill and crucify, and some of them ye shall scourge in your synagogues and persecute them from city to city, that upon you may come righteous blood shed upon the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah.